They never announce themselves. They never have to. When old money passes, it is like barometric pressure. You feel it without understanding why. You have just straightened your posture, lowered your voice, and checked that the mud is off your shoes. The door is painted a colour that no catalogue sells, something made by sunlight and rain over decades. The brass knocker is worn where 1,000 hands found the same comfortable ridge. A visitor with brisk new fortunes might miss these details. That is the first mistake. The etiquette of old money is not a book of rules. It is weathered wood and the shadow of family portraits whose eyes do not judge so much as remember. If there is a first law, it is silence. Not the silence of fear, but the silence of confidence, the kind that does not need to prove, price, or post. Old money treats money the way sailors treat the sea, with respect, caution, and an understanding that it will humble anyone who believes himself its master. The new rich tell stories about what they have acquired. The old carry on as if the objects acquired them. You hear it in a pause before a name is used, in a sentence finished with understatement, where a trumpet blast might have been expected. A man says, "It has done well for us," and you later learn he means the estate kept 3 generations through wars, panics, and a ruinous divorce. The second law is time. In old houses, clocks rarely match. They drift in different rooms, because the family keeps a longer calendar. What is urgent in the week is unimportant in the decade. The etiquette grows from this patience. You write the note today, because a letter is an anchor against forgetfulness 10 years from now. You repair a chair rather than replace it because your grandchildren's hands will find the same armrest, and continuity teaches them to sit still in a world that wants to bounce. The wealthy who arrived last Tuesday must show evidence. The ones who have been here since last century avoid exhibits. They are cautious with novelty, not because they fear change, but because they catalogue its costs. Ward McAllister once claimed there were only 400 people in the New York that mattered, the precise capacity of Mrs. Astor's ballroom. He was boastful, and history punished him for it, as it punishes everyone who tries to put a fence around a fog. Yet he understood something about gates. The gatekeeper is rarely the person you think. The old order is maintained not through loud proclamations, but through secretaries, club committees, and the quiet tyranny of invitation lists that rewrite a city's map without drawing a single line. In Newport, those oceanside palaces with their Italianate fantasies looked like victory. In truth, they were audition tapes, acknowledgements that the currency of arrival is never cash alone. The new rich built for notice, the old rich noticed who did not need notice. The language of old money is as careful as its accounts. In the 1950s, a British linguist named Alan Ross wrote about the difference between you and non-you, a taxonomy of words that betrayed class like fingerprints under a blue lamp. It was a parlour game with pointed edges. Old money calls a room a sitting room, not a lounge. It uses napkin, not serviette. It prefers understatement to embroidery, the simplest word that carries a lifetime's freight. This is not snobbery for sport, though it can become that. It is a method for cooling the temperature of the conversation. The new rich burn to a crisp on their own enthusiasm. The old have learned to stay barely warm. Look at the clothes! Not logo, but lineage. The jacket that fits like a remembered promise. The shoes resoled enough times to belong on a family tree. Savile Row taught a lesson that is easily learned and rarely followed. True luxury disappears into proportion. Old money recognizes cloth by drape, not label. It treats jewelry like punctuation, rarely exclamation. The mistake of the newly minted is to sell the plot in order to buy adjectives. They wear proof. The old prefer grammar. One can always spot the novice. He introduces the watch before he introduces himself, or he drops the name of the yacht before he says good evening to the coxswain who ties the rope. At table, the ceremony is austere. White linen, crystal that sings, silver that is heavy not because it shouts price, but because weight steadies the hand. The etiquette is a choreography meant to make other people comfortable. You do not reach across. You ask. You never leave a guest to find their own chair, because wandering is for museums, not dinners. A century ago, Emily Post attempted to codify this in her book on etiquette, published in 1922. She was not inventing manners, she was describing the way a civilized life prevents collision. The old rich accept these rituals the way pianists accept scales. Art hides the training. Artlessness reveals its absence in every clatter of cutlery. Discretion is the hinge on which every old house swings. Photographs are not trophies, but records. The staff are not scenery, but professionals, whose names are noted and whose holidays are remembered. If you must raise your voice to be obeyed, you have already lost the argument. The new rich demand a table, the old are seated. The new rich perform generosity, the old fund hospitals with checks that appear as if by clerical error. When a name does go on a building, it is often a dead relative's, an offering to continuity rather than a brass shout. The difference is theological. One worships acquisition, the other ancestor. A quiet donor remembers that a wing will outlive an ego. That is not virtue, it is arithmetic. There is, of course, scandal. No lineage is clean. Money attracts pressure the way tall buildings attract wind. What marks the old families is not purity, but the way they bury what breaks. The nephew who runs off to the wrong war, the cousin who cannot sit a dinner without upsetting the salt, the aunt who loses a fortune to a man with an idea written on a napkin. The discipline is in containment. PR for the new rich is a flamethrower. For the old, it is a sponge. One soaks and wrings. You will hear rumours travel through old rooms like a draught. You will rarely hear a door slam. The drama is internal, and the etiquette of crisis is the same as the etiquette of dessert. Small gestures, clean plates, no speeches. The architecture teaches as much as the table. A library's ladder suggests that ideas rank higher than ceilings. The mezzanine of a townhouse whispers that good rooms need good light and a place to retreat. The garden is less about flowers than about paths that curve out of sight, inviting the mind to imagine there is more. European courts once enforced sumptuary laws, declaring what fabrics and furs certain ranks might wear. Old money internalized a more private statute: never dress beyond the quality of your character. That is why a threadbare cashmere can outshine a fresh Fashion Week acquisition. Patina is earned. It cannot be bought, though imitation is available. It peels within a season. Listen to the financial habits, and you will hear the etiquette behind the numbers. Income is for living. Principle is for defending. The painting is not an asset to be flipped. It is an heirloom to be lent. Real estate, if well chosen, is not decoration. It is policy. There is a reason trustees prefer bonds that pay while you sleep, and fields that feed whether you are fashionable or not. The old rich fear one thing above embarrassment: the forced sale. This fear disciplines the Christmas. It keeps the car one model older than the neighbour imagines, and puts the new boiler before the new boat. The motto is neither frugal nor flashy. It is something colder, durable. Conversation is curated with cruelty disguised as care. Money, health, and the self are the three subjects that are not allowed to sit at the head of the table. You may be brilliant, but you may not recite your brilliance without invitation. Intellect is valued, cleverness tolerated, loudness fined. A miracle occurs in these rooms that the newly prosperous do not trust. Silence is allowed to win. One person stops speaking without being interrupted. Another chooses to say nothing, and it is not considered failure. This is not because the old rich are timid. It is because they have seen what noise costs when it reaches the courts. What the new rich misunderstand most deeply is that old money is not a taste so much as a temperament. It is not a palette of creams and navies, although it often looks that way. It is the habit of filtering every impulse through the sieve of consequence. Do you need to be seen, or do you need to be remembered? Are you buying an object, or are you buying a relationship with the person who made it, the institution that will care for it, and the next generation who will inherit it? That is why they prefer a portrait to a billboard and a university archive to a viral post. Fame is an undisciplined debtor. Legacy pays on time. History is instructive if you know where to look. The so-called 400 rose and fell on invitations rather than proclamations. The European salons survived revolutions by relocating their conversations, not their chandeliers. The American country house learned, after those abrupt market winters, to plant trees that would shade airs it would never meet. When fashion declared debutantes finished, Philanthropy found cotillions of a newer kind. Galas with grudges, guest lists with soft power, committees where votes were traded like securities. Through each reinvention, the etiquette remained, not as nostalgia, but as strategy. Restraint is not quaint, it is armor. The test arrives when no one is looking. A coat is taken, and you remember the name of the person who took it. A small mistake is made, and you cover it without turning the error into entertainment. A taxi splashes your shoes, and you do not hiss at the driver because the dignity you defend is your own. If you are in a crowd and feel the urge to speak louder, you leave the crowd. If you are tempted to pull out a camera to prove you were present, consider that presence is proved by the quality of your memory, not the quantity of your pixels. Objects can be owned. Moments must be kept. This all sounds severe to those who equate pleasure with display, but the comedy is that old money loves joy. It laughs hardest at jokes that arrive softly. It loves dogs that misbehave with style and children who can be quiet in museums and loud on lawns. It is tender with houses the way gardeners are tender with trees, taking the long sadness of maintenance in exchange for the sudden happiness of spring. In art, it prefers brushwork to billboard, and in music it favors the live mistake over the perfect track. It despises cruelty in the guise of taste and cannot tolerate rudeness dressed as candor. You cannot fake it for long. You can buy the right glasses and learn the right verbs. You can put your watch away and still be betrayed by the way your eyes search for a mirror. Old money etiquette is a practice, not a pose. It rewards repetition, humility, and the hard trial of keeping your enthusiasms private until they are strong enough to stand without applause. Learn to write notes that thank without flattering. Learn to listen as if silence were an instrument. Learn to sit through an evening without once looking at your phone under the table. You will not be admitted to a secret order. You will discover that you no longer require admission. There is a final rule, kept behind the others. The measure of wealth is what you can refuse. The new rich accept every invitation and ask for more. The old decline sometimes, and the life improves. You will know you have crossed a certain river when you say no without explanation, not cruelty, simply alignment. The unspoken etiquette is not about who is better, it is about who is not hurried. You slow your words, you slow your spending, you slow your need to be seen. You wake one morning and realize the most expensive thing in the house is the quiet. If you do all this, no door flies open, no trumpet announces your arrival, the hallway will remain narrow, the runner slightly worn, the portraits indifferent. Someone will take your coat and forget your name, and you will not mind. In an hour, the conversation will settle into a fine grain, like sediment in a glass, and you will say something useful, or you will say nothing at all. When you rise to leave, you will not look back to memorize the scene. The weather will have changed, and you will not be able to say when. That is the etiquette, the art of leaving a room as if you were never the subject, only the witness, and knowing that, in certain houses, that is the highest honor.